The moment after death, a light appears. It calls you, comforts you, tells you to follow. But what if that light is the snare? What if the moon is not guiding you home, but leading you back into the trap? Across centuries, mystics and initiates whispered the same warning. The moon is no gentle guardian. It is the recycler of souls, the keeper of the wheel, the mirror that erases memory and binds you again to flesh and time. The tunnel of light, the pull of peace, the promise of reunion. These are not gifts. They are bait. And if you follow blindly, your story begins again, stripped of remembrance, bound once more to suffering you thought you had escaped. This is the truth hidden behind the silver glow in our skies. The moon is not what you think it is. It is the trap of reincarnation. And the question is, when the moment comes, will you remember? The moon has always been humanity's trusted companion. For thousands of years it has hung above us, silver and serene, shaping the tides, marking the months, illuminating the darkness. Poets call it the mirror of love. Farmers once planted by its glow. Lovers confessed beneath its light. And yet behind this beauty, something far older and far more unsettling has been whispered by mystics and initiates across the ages. The moon may not be the gentle guardian it appears to be. It may instead be the false light. When souls leave the body, countless near-death testimonies describe the same phenomenon. A radiant tunnel, a welcoming light. Comfort floods the spirit. Loved ones seem to call from the other side. But traditions that dared to peer deeper warned us not to follow blindly. The Gnostics, in texts like the hypostasis of the archons, wrote that powers called archons rule over the planetary spheres, deceiving souls and binding them again to the cycle of flesh. Tibetan lamas, in the Bardo Thodol, the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead, cautioned that dazzling lights appear between death and rebirth, and the unprepared spirit, terrified or enchanted, is pulled back into samsara, the endless wheel of suffering. These warnings suggest that the light is not always liberation. It may be the mechanism of return, the veil that strips memory and sends the soul once more into amnesia. Think of it. How many lifetimes have you lived? How many times have you forgotten who you truly are? If the moon plays its role as gatekeeper of this cycle, then its glow is not just reflected sunlight, it is the reflection of captivity. The ancients preserved fragments of this suspicion. Some myths say there was a time before the moon existed in Earth's skies, that it was placed here deliberately as part of the architecture of control. In Greek lore, Aristotle recorded that certain tribes once remembered an age before there was a moon in the heavens. In African Zulu tradition, tales speak of two brothers who rolled the moon into place, setting it as a lamp, or perhaps a watchtower. And in the teachings of Gnostic sects, the moon was seen as part of a counterfeit system, a false mirror that captures the soul. This is the paradox of the false light. It comforts us, yet deceives. It feels like homecoming, yet it erases the very memory of home. Each time the soul follows it, the slate is wiped clean, and the eternal being is thrust once again into flesh, into pain, into learning, into forgetting. The moon is the beautiful prison, the silver snare. And so, the question arises, if you saw the light at the end, would you know to turn away? The cycle of return is one of the oldest mysteries of human existence. Across cultures, across time, we find the same haunting recognition that death is not the end, but a passage that leads again into birth. In Hindu philosophy, The Upanishads describe the soul, the Atman, journeying through countless incarnations until it remembers its unity with the Absolute. In Buddhism, the wheel of samsara turns endlessly, fueled by desire, aversion, and ignorance. In the Gnostic texts buried at Nag Hammadi, the archons are said to weave illusions to keep the spirit from escaping into the pleroma, the realm of true light. And in the Tibetan Bardo Thodol, the soul wanders through visions, terrified and dazzled, until its fear pulls it back into another womb. The pattern repeats, life after life, story after story. For many, this cycle carries the fragrance of destiny, of lessons not yet learned, of karmic debts still waiting to be balanced. Yet beneath these noble interpretations is also a wound, a subtle exhaustion, an ache that whispers in the marrow of the soul. Have you not felt it? The déjà vu of repeating choices, the strange familiarity of faces, places, and patterns, the sense that you are acting out a play you have performed before, only with new costumes and names. This is the wound of reincarnation, a spiritual amnesia that resets the stage but never erases the weight of the roles. It is here that the moon shadow grows long. For if, as the mystics warned, the moon functions as a gate of return, then its light is not a liberation, but a command. You will go back, you will forget, you will try again. And while in one sense this endless return can refine the soul like metal in a furnace, in another sense it is a prison. The walls invisible, the guard unseen, the sentence unending. The ancient Hindus spoke of the samsaric wheel, a cosmic circle of birth and death spinning until moksha, release, is attained. Plato, in his myth of air, told of souls choosing their next lives, drinking from the river of forgetfulness before descending once more to earth. These accounts suggest not just a cycle, but a mechanism, a system that ensures no one leaves until they are ready, or until they awaken to the truth. And yet, how many awaken? How many remember? The evidence of history suggests very few. In the silence of meditation, in dreams that echo other times, some glimpse fragments of past lives. A soldier dying in one century returns as a healer in another. A mother loses a child in one life, only to meet the same soul reborn as her parent in the next. The stories differ, but the thread remains. Souls circling endlessly, weaving and unweaving the same tapestry. And always the moon above watching, timing, marking the return. So the question deepens. Is this cycle truly the compassionate teaching of the universe, patiently guiding us to mastery? Or is it the most subtle form of captivity? A recycling of energy, an erasure of memory, a system that keeps the soul from ever remembering what lies beyond? Perhaps it is both. Perhaps the prison is also the teacher. But until the soul awakens, the cycle remains, and life becomes a spiral of repetition, looping through the same wound, waiting for the day the spirit remembers it can step outside the circle. From the very beginning, mystery schools and hidden orders tried to prepare the soul for the moment of death. Their teachings were not about fortune-telling or ritual alone, but about survival beyond the body. They knew something the ordinary world forgot. They knew that not every light leads to freedom. In the Gnostic scriptures uncovered at Nag Hammadi, the words are stark. The archons, rulers of the lower realms, project false visions to trap the spirit. They guard the gates between worlds, mimicking the divine, offering radiance that is counterfeit. The hypostasis of the archons describes them as powers of deception, weaving illusion upon illusion, so that the soul mistakes their realm for the kingdom of heaven. To follow them is to be bound once more to flesh. The warning was not isolated to the Gnostics. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and prayers placed in tombs, guided the deceased through the dangers of the afterlife. Among the challenges was the light itself, radiant beings who asked the soul to surrender and be weighed. But the initiate, who had learned the hidden names of the gods and the passwords of the gates, could resist. To know the truth was to slip past the counterfeit, to claim sovereignty even before the throne of judgment. The uninitiated would follow docilely, entranced by the brilliance. The initiated would question, would challenge, would see through the mask. In Tibet, the Bardo Thodol cautioned against dazzling lights that appear between death and rebirth. The untrained soul, overwhelmed by fear or craving, runs toward the familiar. But the wise are instructed, do not cling, do not flee. The text warns that terrifying deities and enchanting visions are projections of your own mind. To follow them is to be pulled back into samsara. To recognize them as illusions is to awaken. The ancient lamas insisted that the light of liberation is not the soft comfort that beckons, but the piercing brilliance too intense for the unprepared to bear. Those who recoil from it fall back into the cycle. Those who endure its radiance step into freedom. Even Plato, in his myth of air, hinted at this mystery. He told of souls gathered after death, choosing their next lives, drinking from the river of forgetfulness before returning to earth. The forgetting was essential for the cycle to continue, but the philosopher who remembered, who refused the full draft, could escape. The warning echoes across traditions. Beware the easy path. Beware the gentle call. Beware the light that promises homecoming. What we are left with is a map of caution. The ancients, each in their own tongue, are whispering the same truth. Do not follow blindly. Question the light. Hold your awareness when all else dissolves, because the greatest danger after death is not darkness. It is the counterfeit light that blinds you so that you cannot see the stars beyond. There are whispers, old and new, that the moon is more than a silent rock circling the earth. To the astronomer, it is a satellite, a reflector of sunlight, a body of dust and stone. But to the mystic, it has always been something more. A watcher, a regulator, a mirror that does not simply shine back our world, but manipulates it. And in esoteric traditions, in the darker corners of forbidden texts, there is a theory that chills the soul, that the moon is not just a companion in the sky, but a station of return, a place where souls are intercepted, stripped, and recycled back into flesh. Writers like G.I. Gurdjieff hinted at this in the early 20th century, teaching that human beings are food for the moon, our energies harvested to sustain cosmic machinery. He was not the first. In ancient Mesopotamia, the moon god Sin, or Nana, was not simply a benevolent figure. He was a judge of destinies, a measurer of lives, a deity who held power over the passage of souls. Some Gnostic sects went further, naming the moon as part of the counterfeit system created by the demiurge, the false god who fashioned this world of matter to ensnare spirit. To them, the moon was not neutral. It was part of the trap. Modern accounts of near-death experiences sometimes echo this suspicion. Testimonies speak of lights that draw the soul in, of presences that encourage surrender, of a sense of energy being drained before the return to earth. These experiences are often interpreted as benevolent, but the consistency is striking. If there is a mechanism of capture, it would present itself as comfort. It would offer reunion, warmth, relief. And in that surrender, the vital essence of the soul, its memories, its awareness, could be siphoned away, leaving only enough spark to animate the next body. The Tibetan Bardo Thodol describes this in symbolic language. The soul, encountering visions, is told, "Do not cling to them, do not fear them. The moment you cling, the moment you flee, you fall back into rebirth." The teaching suggests that there is a pull, a current, that leads downward unless resisted. Likewise, Egyptian funerary texts describe the weighing of the heart, the stripping of names and identities, before the soul may continue its journey. Stripping and erasure are consistent themes. If memory is the thread of freedom, then the erasure of memory is the machinery of captivity. What makes this theory so unsettling is its implication that Earth is not a school alone, but a farm, that souls are harvested, not only for their lessons, but for their energy, that the moon above, so gentle to the poet's eye, may be the mechanism of that harvest. And if so, then every life, every cycle of death and rebirth is part of a system designed not to free us, but to feed on us. The question then is whether this cycle can be broken. If awareness is the key, then remembering at the moment of death becomes the act of liberation, to refuse the false light, to hold one's energy intact, to step beyond the gate of the moon. Because if the theory is true, the moon's glow is not just illumination, it is extraction. It is the harvest of souls. The moon has always enchanted the human eye. It hangs above the world like a silver lamp, steady and familiar, waxing and waning in rhythms that shape our calendars and our tides. Poets compare it to a lover's face, glowing softly in the night. Mystics speak of its role in dreams, opening doorways to the unconscious. Farmers once trusted it to tell them when to sow, when to harvest. To the human heart, the moon has been comfort, constancy, even protection. But what if the very beauty we adore is also the snare? What if the moon's soft radiance is the veil that keeps us docile, bound within the wheel of return? Esoteric traditions often speak of duality. What shines with light may also conceal shadow. The Gnostics believed that the material world was a counterfeit creation, a simulation crafted by the demiurge to keep divine sparks imprisoned. The moon, to them, was part of this architecture. It seduced the eye, lulled the heart, and promised safety under its glow. Yet its light was not its own. It reflected the sun, a borrowed brilliance. And in this reflection lies the symbol of illusion, beauty that appears radiant, but does not originate from within. The ancients told stories that reveal this hidden suspicion. Aristotle recorded that certain tribes remembered a time before the moon was in the sky. Zulu traditions speak of two brothers who brought the moon into place, a tale that sounds less like myth and more like memory of something imposed. If the moon was a later arrival, then its presence as humanity's constant companion is not eternal. It was placed, and if it was placed, then it may have a purpose. A prison dressed as a pearl. The comfort the moon provides is undeniable. Its cycles soothe us. Its glow makes the night less terrifying. Its pull orders the waters of earth and the waters of our own bodies. But comfort can be the most subtle form of captivity. When we feel safe, we stop questioning. When the familiar lulls us, we forget to look deeper. The moon whispers to the soul, "You are protected here, you belong here, you must return here." And yet beneath that lullaby is a command. Modern psychology mirrors this in its language of safety and attachment. People cling to relationships that harm them simply because they are familiar. Nations submit to rulers who oppress them, if only the rulers promise security. In the same way, the soul, faced with the radiance of the moon, may mistake its glow for freedom, when in truth, it is the gilded bars of a cage. beauty as deception, familiarity as restraint. And so the paradox emerges. The moon is both enchanting and enslaving. It seduces through its loveliness, its constancy, its false promise that all is well. Yet those who peer through the veil, who see that its light is borrowed, begin to sense the deeper truth. The moon's beauty is the mask of the prison, and like all prisons, it thrives on the belief that escape is neither necessary nor possible. The idea of the moon being guarded by entities is deeply rooted in Gnostic and esoteric traditions. In the hypostasis of the archons are described as rulers of the lower realms, projecting illusions to keep souls bound to material existence. These beings are not merely symbolic. In many interpretations, they are seen as literal gatekeepers, stationed at the planetary spheres, and especially at the moon, to challenge or ensnare souls on their passage. The Gnostics believed that between the soul and its return to the divine source, there are watchers who interrogate, deceive, and test. Each sphere is guarded by powers that demand passwords or secret names. Without knowledge, the soul is turned back. This concept of guardians at the gates is echoed in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which describes the deceased meeting beings at different thresholds. To pass, one had to know the right words, the right spells, the right truths. The Tibetans too, in the Bardo Thodol, warned that entities, sometimes terrifying, sometimes beautiful, appear in the after-death state, and that recognition is the key. Those who recognize projections for what they are passed beyond, those who mistake them for ultimate reality, fall again into rebirth. The moon, in this lens, is not just a satellite, but a threshold. If souls are drawn to its light, then those who stand at its passageways would be tasked with maintaining the cycle. Some call them archons. Others call them watchers. In apocryphal Jewish texts like the Book of Enoch, watchers descend to influence human affairs, teaching forbidden knowledge and binding humanity further to matter. Later mystics connected these watchers with the planetary guardians of Gnostic cosmology. And if the moon is the first great gate above the earth, it would make sense that its entryways are not unguarded. Modern experiencers sometimes describe encounters with beings of light during near-death experiences, entities who seem benevolent, who encourage surrender to the tunnel. While many interpret this as divine, others suggest it aligns with the ancient warnings, that the luminous figures are part of the machinery of return, drawing the soul back toward incarnation, a harvest not only of memory and energy, but of consent, because the most effective prison is one in which the prisoner agrees to re-enter the cell, so the image that emerges is haunting. The moon glowing softly above us, beautiful and serene, and at its unseen threshold, guardians who test, deceive, or shepherd souls back into the cycle. The archons, the watchers, the entities of the gate. Whether as myth, symbol, or literal beings, they serve the same function, to ensure that most souls never pass beyond. Only the prepared, those who awaken, who remember, who refuse the false light, slip past their grasp. For the rest, the moon remains not just a companion of Earth, but the guarded checkpoint of the soul. There is a mystery that every soul knows, but few can name. The moment of birth feels like the beginning of a story, but somewhere deep inside, there is a flicker of recognition, a feeling that this has all happened before, and yet the details, the names, the lessons already lived, remain veiled. This forgetting is not accidental. Across spiritual traditions, the stripping of memory before rebirth is described as a deliberate act, a mechanism of the cycle itself. Without amnesia, the wheel of reincarnation could not turn. With memory intact, no soul would willingly repeat the same mistakes. No soul would fall into the same illusions. But with memory erased, life becomes a classroom where the same lesson is presented again and again until it is finally learned. The Greeks told this secret through myth. In Plato's myth of souls gathered after death and were led to the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Each soul was required to drink before being sent back to earth. The more one drank, the more was forgotten. Only those who drank sparingly carried fragments of memory into their next life, surfacing as intuition or déjà vu. In Hindu and Buddhist thought, this veil of forgetting is called avidya, ignorance, the blindness that keeps the soul tethered to samsara. It is not simple amnesia, but a cosmic fog that blinds us to our eternal nature. The Bardo Thodol also speaks of this veil, warning that if the soul does not recognize the visions it encounters, fear and confusion will force it back into rebirth, stripped of remembrance. The Gnostics framed it in starker terms. They believed the archons actively erased memory, draining the soul of its divine awareness so that it could not escape the demiurge's world. In their vision, the amnesia was not benevolent but enforced, a strategy of control. By ensuring that the soul forgets its origin, the powers of the lower realms keep it docile, obedient to the cycle of flesh. To remember is rebellion, to forget is to be enslaved. Even in modern accounts of near-death experiences, fragments of this pattern emerge. Many describe a review of their life, a panoramic remembering of every detail, followed by an overwhelming light that draws them toward rebirth. Yet when they return to the body, the vastness of what they saw is blurred, reduced to fragments. It is as if something filters the memory, allowing just enough to inspire, but not enough to liberate. Psychologists call it repression, but mystics call it design. Why must the soul forget? Some traditions insist it is mercy, that to carry every wound, every grief, every loss across lifetimes would crush us. Others suggest it is pedagogy, that lessons must be relearned in fresh contexts. But the darker reading is more unsettling. Forgetting ensures compliance. It keeps the cycle turning. It prevents the soul from realizing that it has always had a choice. And so each life begins in innocence. But beneath that innocence is erasure. The names of past lovers lost, the wisdom of past mistakes, the scars of forgotten wars, all wiped clean. And the soul, once infinite, enters once more as a child, obedient, malleable, bound again to the wheel, until one day, in this life or another, it remembers that forgetting was never the truth. It was only the lock on the door of freedom. The moon has always been tied to the hidden landscape of the mind. Its cycles mark not just the turning of tides and seasons, but the ebb and flow of human emotion. In astrology, it rules the subconscious, the dreams that rise unbidden, the instincts that govern us before thought intervenes. To the mystic eye, this is no coincidence. If the moon is part of the mechanism of return, then its influence must reach deep into the layers of the psyche, shaping not only the body's rhythms, but the very structure of the inner world. Carl Jung described the unconscious as a vast ocean beneath the surface of awareness, filled with archetypes, symbols, and forgotten memories. The moon has long been the emblem of that ocean. It is the reflector of light, never shining with its own brilliance, but mirroring back to us what is hidden in shadow. In this way, the moon becomes both the keeper and the manipulator of dreams. When we sleep, we drift into its realm, encountering visions that are sometimes personal, sometimes collective, sometimes terrifying. Ancient traditions saw these dreams not as random, but as messages, rehearsals, even traps. The Bardo Thodol warns that the same visions that appear in dreams will appear at death, and that our reactions to them will decide our fate. Fear chains us. Recognition frees us. The connection between the moon and programmed fear is ancient. In Mesopotamia, the moon god Sin was not only a deity of wisdom, but also of judgment. His light was said to reveal hidden sins, striking terror into those who strayed. In later esoteric traditions, the moon became associated with lunacy, madness, and possession. The very word lunatic reflects the belief that lunar phases could disturb the mind, amplifying shadow impulses. If the moon exerts such sway over our subconscious, then it is not just a mirror. It is an influencer. It pulls on the waters of the psyche as surely as it pulls on the seas. In the Gnostic view, this influence serves the archons. By implanting fear, by triggering compulsions and nightmares, they ensure that the soul remains unsteady, ruled by unconscious reactions. To be unaware of the program is to be controlled by it. To see through it is to begin to awaken. Jung himself hinted that dreams often disguise the truth in symbolic form, forcing us to wrestle with archetypes that both reveal and conceal. The moon's role in this process cannot be underestimated. It is the great hypnotist in the sky, the pendulum that swings above the sleeper, drawing out what lies beneath, shaping the dream, reinforcing the cycle. And yet, the moon's mirror is not purely malevolent. In its reflection, we can glimpse the deepest truths of ourselves. It shows us the fears we must face, the wounds we must heal, the patterns we must break. But without awareness, its mirror becomes a maze. We wander through dream and nightmare, unable to tell projection from reality, pulled by tides we cannot resist. The moon holds the key to the subconscious, and unless that key is recognized, it is turned against us, locking us deeper into the cycles of fear, forgetfulness, and return. Near-death testimonies almost always circle back to a single image: the tunnel of light. People describe leaving their bodies, floating upward, and then seeing a radiant glow calling them home. There is comfort, there is peace, there is the overwhelming sense of love. And yet across mystical traditions, from the Tibetan Bardo Thodol to Gnostic warnings, a question lingers. What if that light is not salvation, but the snare? The Bardo Thodol, read to the dying in Tibet, cautions that dazzling lights appear between death and rebirth. Some lights are liberating, but most are traps. The text warns that the soul, untrained and frightened, runs toward what feels familiar and comforting. In that moment of surrender, rebirth is sealed. The cycle begins again. Gnostic texts like the hypostasis of the archons echo this. Entities called archons weave illusions of radiance, presenting false heavens to lure the spirit back into matter. To follow the light without discernment is to remain in bondage. Modern near-death experience research offers striking parallels. Thousands of accounts describe the tunnel of light, the presence of glowing beings, even life reviews, where every moment of existence flashes before the soul's eyes. While many interpret these visions as divine, some experiencers confess an unease, as though something was feeding on their energy, or as though the choice to return was not entirely their own. Whitley Strieber and other researchers have argued that the light may function like a mechanism, recycling consciousness into the same earthly loop. Even the Egyptian Book of the Dead hints at this dynamic. The deceased is confronted by judges and lights, tested with questions, their heart weighed against the feather of Ma'at. If they fail, they are returned, their soul devoured or recycled. Success depends not on passive surrender, but on knowledge, on remembering the truth beyond appearances. These echoes, ancient and modern, suggest that the light encountered at death may not always be what it seems. It may be both comfort and captivity. It may soothe so that it can bind. And the soul, dazzled by radiance, may never ask the most important question: where does the light lead? Perhaps that is why mystics across traditions spoke of awareness as the key. Not fear, not flight, but awareness. To recognize illusion even when it shines brighter than the sun. To remember that what calls itself love may, in truth, be the mechanism of return. So the testimonies of the dead leave us with both beauty and warning. Yes, there is light. Yes, there is peace. But hidden within that radiance may be the very system that keeps the wheel turning. The tunnel of light may not be the end of suffering. It may be its beginning, dressed in the garments of salvation. And the soul that sees this, the soul that pauses at the threshold, may finally step where few have gone before, beyond the snare, into the freedom that lies past the glow. The moon has long been called the mother of the night. Its glow cradles the earth when the sun withdraws, casting a soft, protective light over the sleeping world. In myth and astrology alike, the moon is tied to the feminine, to fertility, to the cycles of blood and womb. It is seen as the great nurturer, the cosmic mother who watches over her children. But in the teachings of mystery schools and the whispers of esoteric traditions, this maternal presence holds a darker edge. The mother who comforts can also be the mother who controls. The archetype of nurture becomes the archetype of captivity. In astrology, the moon governs the inner child, the instincts that seek safety and belonging. It reflects our need for home, our bond to family, our unconscious longing for the maternal embrace. This is why people often describe lunar influence in terms of protection and comfort. Yet the same instincts can be twisted. The child who clings to the mother cannot grow into sovereignty. The soul that clings to the moon may never escape its orbit. The maternal becomes the manipulative, keeping the soul close under the guise of care. Ancient myths offer echoes of this paradox. The Sumerian moon god Nana, also known as Sin, was associated not only with fertility, but with judgment. He presided over cycles of time, recording the fates of men. To be under his care was also to be under his control. In Egypt, the goddess Isis, often linked to lunar power, was both healer and magician, savior and spellcaster. She could protect, but she could also bind. Even in Greek tradition, Artemis, the lunar goddess, was both a patroness of fertility and a merciless huntress, her chastity becoming a weapon of domination. These lunar figures, cloaked in maternal imagery, held dual faces, loving and severe, nurturing and commanding. Gnostic writings bring this duality into sharp relief. They describe the lunar realm as part of the counterfeit creation, where the archons ensnare souls through comfort and familiarity. The moon, with its cyclical embrace, becomes the great mother who gathers her children only to return them again and again to the cradle of flesh. Like the mother who cannot release her child to maturity, the moon refuses to let the soul ascend. Its light whispers, "You are safe here, you belong here, come back to me." And yet, in answering that call, the soul submits to another cycle of forgetting, another round of captivity. Psychology mirrors this archetype in the figure of the devouring mother, the parent who, unable to let go, consumes the child's independence under the mask of love. Jung warned of this shadow side of the feminine, protection that suffocates, affection that binds. The moon, archetypally, plays the same role in the cosmic psyche. It soothes, but it does not liberate. It comforts, but it does not empower. It is the false mother, gentle in appearance, controlling in essence. To see this is not to reject the feminine, but to discern between true nurture and entrapment. The true mother releases the child to its own destiny. The false mother holds on, disguising captivity as care. And so the moon, radiant above us, may not simply be the guardian of the night. It may be the false mother, rocking the cradle of the soul, ensuring that it never leaves home, and never remembers that beyond the home is the infinite. There are few ideas more unsettling than the suggestion that the moon is not what it seems. For most, it is a natural satellite, a remnant of cosmic collision, orbiting Earth for billions of years. Its pull governs tides, its glow governs rituals, its presence has inspired poetry and science alike. But there have always been voices that whisper a different story. What if the moon is not a natural companion, but an artificial construct? What if it was placed in orbit, not by accident of nature, but by design? A machine of control, ancient and deliberate, its purpose hidden behind its serene beauty. Even mainstream science acknowledges the moon's strangeness. Its size and distance make it appear almost the same diameter as the sun, allowing perfect eclipses, a coincidence that has fascinated astronomers for centuries. Its orbit is nearly circular, unlike most satellites. Its density is unusually low, leading some researchers in the 1970s to speculate that it might be hollow. During seismic tests from lunar landings, the moon rang like a bell, reverberating in ways unexpected of a solid body. While most scientists attribute these anomalies to geology, others have taken them as hints that the moon may not be entirely natural. The idea of an artificial moon is not modern invention. Ancient myths sometimes spoke of a time before the moon. Aristotle recorded that certain tribes in Arcadia remembered their ancestors living before there was a moon in the heavens. In Zulu tradition, stories tell of two brothers who brought the moon to the sky, rolling it into place as a hollow shell filled with fire. To the Dogon people of Mali, the moon was described not as a goddess, but as a container, something less divine and more functional. These fragments suggest that cultures across continents once regarded the moon not as an eternal fixture, but as an arrival. In the language of esoteric thought, the moon's placement may have been purposeful. Gurdjieff hinted that human beings were food for the moon, their energy siphoned to sustain a greater machine. The Gnostics would have called it part of the counterfeit creation, engineered by the demiurge to recycle souls. In this framework, the moon is not merely rock and dust, but technology, an orbital device woven into the architecture of captivity. Its cycles regulate not only the seas, but the subconscious rhythms of humanity. Its glow seduces the dying soul, drawing it back into the wheel of return. If the moon is indeed a machine, its design is terrifying in its elegance, visible every night to remind us of its constancy, powerful enough to influence the waters of earth and the waters of the body, mysterious enough to inspire devotion, myth and poetry, and yet hidden in plain sight, its true function unseen, like a prison whose bars are invisible because they shine with beauty. Whether natural or constructed, the moon remains the first gate beyond Earth. Its architecture, whether geological or mechanical, is interwoven with the cycles of life and death, and those who sense it may not be natural feel the chill of a deeper truth. that humanity has been placed under watch, that the trap was built into the sky itself, and that until the illusion is pierced, the soul will remain bound to a machine orbiting silently above, its purpose unknown, its beauty masking captivity. In many parts of the world, hidden in fragments of myth and folklore, are stories that suggest the moon was not always with us. To most of modern science, this sounds impossible. The moon, they say, has orbited Earth for over 4 billion years, born of a colossal impact. And yet the voices of ancient peoples echo with a different memory, that there was once a time before the moon. A time when Earth's nights were darker, the tides gentler, and the heavens incomplete. These myths, scattered across continents, may hold a key to understanding the deeper mystery of the lunar presence. The philosopher Aristotle recorded that the Arcadians of Greece, a people who lived in the highlands of Peloponnese, claimed their ancestors were proselenes, meaning those who lived before the moon. They believed their lineage stretched back to a time when the silver orb was not yet in the sky. To them, the moon was an arrival, a later addition, not an eternal companion. This tradition survived into Roman accounts as well, and though dismissed as folklore, it continues to haunt the imagination. If one group of people carried this memory, might others have too? In Africa, Zulu legends speak of two brothers, Wowane and Mbanku, who brought the moon into place. They rolled it into the sky like a hollow shell filled with light. According to their stories, before this act the earth knew only perpetual mist and chaos. Once the moon was positioned, balance was established, but the tale carries an undertone of imposition. The moon was not natural, it was installed, and its arrival was not gentle but disruptive, changing the rhythm of Earth forever. In South America, the Chibcha people of Colombia told of a time when the moon was created after the sun, as a second light to guard the night. The Mayans too treated the moon not as eternal, but as a being who had phases of birth and death, as if its very existence was cyclical, impermanent, subject to design. Among the Inca, the moon goddess Mamaquilla was revered as the sister of the sun, but also as an arrival who came after him. The implication remains: the sun is eternal, the moon is contingent. Even in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the moon god Nana or Sin, wasn't depicted as a primordial force. His cult rose later than that of the sun god Shamash, as though his role was secondary. A regulator that came after the order of light was already established. The Egyptians likewise tied the moon to Thoth, the god of wisdom and measurement, not the origin of life itself, but the keeper of cycles, the one who counts and controls. What all of these myths suggest is a pattern. Across the world, in cultures separated by oceans and centuries, there are traces of a memory that the moon did not belong to the first creation. It was brought, born, or placed into the sky later, whether seen as a goddess, a shell, or a machine of light. The moon carries the mark of something that intruded upon an older order. If these myths preserve even a fragment of truth, then humanity may be living beneath an object not of primal nature, but of design. A silver orb whose presence has always been both beautiful and suspect. The moon's power over water has never been a matter of debate. Science confirms what ancient people already knew. Its gravitational pull stirs the oceans, raising and lowering the tides like a breath that moves across the body of the earth. But the ancients also believed that this pull extended beyond the seas, into the waters of the body and the hidden currents of life itself. They saw the moon not only as the keeper of tides, but as the regulator of fertility, the measure of blood, the clock by which the secret rhythms of human existence are kept. Women's cycles align closely with the lunar month of 29.5 days. Ancient cultures everywhere noticed this, binding the moon to the mysteries of the womb, to pregnancy, birth, and renewal. The Greeks tied Artemis and Selene to chastity and motherhood, twin aspects of the feminine. In Egypt, Isis and Hathor were linked to the moon's glow, both as nurturers and as regulators of reproduction. In India, Chandra was seen as the god of fertility, influencing crops, animals, and the flow of life through humans. Even the very word menstruation carries the imprint of the moon, derived from the same root as month, a reflection of the cycle measured by its phases. This connection between the moon and blood was not only biological, but spiritual. To the Maya, the moon goddess Ixchel presided over midwifery and medicine. Her phases dictated times of planting and healing, but also times of danger when blood sacrifices were made to maintain cosmic balance. Among the Babylonians, eclipses were moments of terror, when the balance of lunar influence was disturbed, believed to herald famine or miscarriage. The moon's relationship to fertility was sacred, but also perilous. For what it granted, it could also withhold. In esoteric traditions, this regulation of blood and water took on a darker interpretation. The Gnostics saw the moon as one of the archon's mechanisms for binding souls to matter, manipulating the very fluids of the body to ensure that life continued generation after generation. By controlling reproduction, the moon ensured the wheel of birth never ceased. Its pull on the oceans was mirrored in its pull on the womb, guaranteeing that the cycle of incarnation remained unbroken. Modern science echoes fragments of these ancient intuitions. Studies have shown that human sleep cycles, melatonin production, and even fertility patterns shift with lunar phases. In some rural communities, childbirth is statistically more likely during the full moon. Ocean tides, governed by lunar gravity, affect not only sea life, but the migrations of fish and the spawning of coral. Everything that flows, everything that responds to rhythm, is under lunar sway. The moon's hand reaches into the womb, the bloodstream, the unconscious mind. To see this influence clearly is to realize the moon's role is not passive. It orchestrates, it conducts, it manipulates the tides of the earth and the tides of the body, tying the fate of human reproduction to its own cold orbit. And if the moon is part of a system designed for captivity, then this influence is not benign. It ensures there is always new flesh for old souls, always new blood to bind the spirit, always another generation drawn into the wheel. The oceans rise, the wombs quicken, the cycles repeat, all under the silver gaze of the moon. The idea of a lunar matrix may sound like modern science fiction, but in truth, it echoes some of the oldest teachings humanity has preserved. The moon, in its steady cycles, has always been seen as more than a rock in the sky. To the ancients, it was the clock of destiny, the regulator of birth and death, the silent keeper of the wheel. When we speak of karma, of patterns that repeat across lifetimes, it is difficult not to see the moon as its great timekeeper. Just as it governs the tides and the blood, it may also govern the rhythm of return. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, karma is the binding law of cause and effect. Every action, every thought, every desire plants a seed that will bear fruit, either in this life or the next. Samsara, the wheel of birth and death, is the endless field in which those seeds grow. And yet teachers also warn that samsara is not the true reality. It is a cycle that can be transcended. The Tibetan Bardo Thodol instructed the dying not to be fooled by visions or dazzling lights, not to be drawn back into the cycle, but to recognize their own awareness as the key to liberation. The implication is clear. Something in the system is designed to pull us back. Something uses karma as both teacher and trap. The Gnostics put a sharper edge on this. They spoke of the archons weaving a counterfeit world, a matrix of illusion that bound the soul through fate and repetition. The planetary spheres, with the moon nearest to us, were seen as stations of control, each imprinting patterns that souls could not easily break. The moon, closest and most constant, became the most potent of these influences. It reflected back not just the light of the sun, but the stories we had already lived. To pass beyond it meant remembering that those stories were not ultimate truth, but projections. To fail meant falling again into the same script. Modern psychology mirrors this language in its study of trauma and conditioning. People repeat relationships that wound them, choices that diminish them, patterns that feel familiar even when they bring suffering. The unconscious mind, ruled by memory and emotion, plays the same script until awareness intervenes. In this way, the human psyche itself is a lunar mirror, reflecting back what has not yet been healed, replaying the drama until the lesson is integrated. The moon above and the moon within seem to conspire in the same work: repetition, reflection, return. If this is the lunar matrix, then its purpose is both initiation and imprisonment. For some, it is a cosmic teacher, forcing the soul to grow by confronting the same lesson until mastery is achieved. For others, it is a prison, designed to feed on the energy of repetition, never allowing the spirit to remember its true freedom. Perhaps it is both, a system that tests but also consumes, a mirror that both reveals and deceives. To see the matrix for what it is requires more than intellect. It requires the piercing awareness to recognize that the patterns of your life are not accidents. They are echoes, they are repetitions, and until they are recognized, the moon will continue to cast its silver light, guiding you back into the same stories, the same wounds, the same scripts you thought you had escaped. The lunar matrix holds the cycle in place. Awareness alone can loosen its grip. Across mystical traditions, there is a recurring suggestion that incarnation is not entirely voluntary, but structured by contracts made before birth. In some teachings, these agreements are said to be chosen by the soul itself. Commitments to heal ancestral wounds, repay karmic debts, or continue unfinished lessons. In others, particularly in Gnostic thought, these contracts are framed less as choice and more as compulsion. The archons and planetary powers requiring binding terms before the soul can re-enter material life. The symbolism of Saturn in esoteric cosmology reinforces this idea. Saturn was called the Great Initiator, the Devourer of Time, and the Gatekeeper of Incarnation. Some traditions taught that souls had to pass through Saturn's ring to enter matter, accepting limitations and responsibilities as part of a cosmic contract. While not explicitly lunar, the moon was understood as the nearest station of this system, a recorder of karmic imprints, an enforcer of cycles, and, in some interpretations, the notary of the soul's return. Modern spiritual frameworks have expanded this into the concept of soul contracts. Before birth, individuals are believed to agree to certain challenges, relationships, and lessons. These agreements ensure that karmic patterns are addressed, yet the darker interpretation, which aligns with Gnostic suspicion, suggests these contracts are not fully free. They are signed within a system designed to ensure return. The moon's role, as timekeeper of cycles and mirror of memory, becomes central. It binds souls through familiarity, obligation, and the subtle enforcement of agreements made in states of forgetfulness. In this lens, the contract of return is less like a sacred vow and more like a legal snare. The soul, dazzled by light, comforted by guides, is persuaded to agree once again to re-enter flesh. The fine print ensures amnesia. The cycle continues. Only those who awaken at the threshold, who remember the true nature of the system, may refuse the signature. Only they may step beyond the lunar tribunal and dissolve the contract that was never theirs to keep. Saturn and the Moon form a haunting pair in esoteric cosmology. Saturn has long been called the devourer of time, the gatekeeper of incarnation, the one who binds souls to the laws of karma. Myths identify Saturn with Cronus, the Titan who swallowed his own children so that none could overthrow him. This image is not merely cruelty, but an archetype. Time itself consumes all things, from empires to human lives. In initiatory traditions, Saturn was seen as the cosmic examiner, the planet through which every soul must pass, binding itself to time, mortality, and consequence. The Moon, by contrast, is closer, softer, more deceptive. Where Saturn marks the entry point into matter, the Moon governs the recycling process once incarnation has begun. It draws on the waters, the womb, the subconscious. Its cycles mirror the soul's returns, pulling consciousness back into the wheel. If Saturn is the architect of time, the Moon is its recycler, stripping memory, seducing the spirit with light, and ensuring that contracts are honored. Together, they operate like jailer and warden. Saturn holds the keys to entry. The Moon ensures you never leave. Astrology reflects this twin influence. Saturn is discipline, karma, the lessons that break illusions. The Moon is instinct, memory, the longing for safety. One binds through fear of time's scarcity. The other binds through comfort and familiarity. Between them, they weave the net that keeps humanity tethered to samsara. The Gnostics framed this pairing as part of the counterfeit creation. They believed the demiurge used the planetary spheres as checkpoints, each ruled by archons who enforced limitation. Saturn was the stern examiner, demanding accounting for every deed. The Moon was the recycler, luring the soul back with its false maternal glow. To pass through their grip required gnosis, knowledge of the higher reality that transcended both time and illusion. Even in modern esotericism, echoes of this teaching remain. Some occult schools describe Saturn as the great initiator, the test of mortality, responsibility, and consequence. The Moon is cast as the hypnotist, the dreamweaver, the gate of forgetting. When combined, their influence is total. Saturn ensures the contract is binding, the Moon ensures it is renewed. So the image of the twin powers emerges. Saturn, the devourer of years, the inexorable hand of time. The Moon, the silvery mirror, the recycler of souls. One ensures that every birth is marked by limitation. The other ensures that every death becomes a return. Together, they shape the architecture of the trap, the cosmic machinery that turns eternity into cycles. And until awareness pierces both, the soul remains bound, devoured by Saturn's time, seduced by the Moon's light, circling endlessly between the two. Mystical traditions from every corner of the world have hinted at something chilling in the in-between state, that the soul, after death, is not simply guided, but harvested. Shamans in South America spoke of predators in the unseen realms who feed on the luminous energy of humans, warning initiates to strengthen their spirit body before traveling outside of the flesh. The Tibetan Bardo Thodol describes terrifying beings who appear between lives, some radiant, others monstrous, all designed to provoke fear or longing. To mistake them for ultimate truth is to fall back into the cycle, offering one's energy to forces that thrive on attachment. The Gnostics sharpened this into a stark doctrine. They described the archons, rulers of the planetary spheres, as parasites, siphoning the vitality of souls. In their cosmology, every reincarnation was not a gift, but a harvest, the soul's essence drawn off before being cast again into matter. The hypostasis of the archons portrays these beings as jealous powers, feeding off ignorance and fear. Salvation was not in worship, but in gnosis, knowledge that freed the soul from becoming food. Even in indigenous accounts, echoes of this belief remain. Australian Aboriginal lore speaks of sky beings who consume the essence of those unprepared for the journey. In Norse myth, Draga, the hungry dead, lingered to feed on the living's vitality. While different in detail, the thread is the same. Energy is currency in the unseen realms, and not every being encountered after death is benevolent. Modern testimonies of near-death experiences sometimes resonate with these warnings. While many describe peace and light, others recall presences that seem to draw power from their fear, or even draining sensations before being pulled back into the body. Researchers like Robert Monroe and Carlos Castaneda spoke of loosh, a term for the energy harvested from human emotional experience, especially in states of fear and awe. This loosh, they argued, is what certain non-physical beings seek to collect. The moon and Saturn, framed in esoteric lore as recycler and timekeeper, become the twin engines of this harvest. Saturn enforces the contract of return, binding the soul to karma. The moon strips memory and recycles energy, ensuring that each incarnation begins anew but never free. Between lives, the harvest is not metaphorical but experiential. The soul's light is tasted, its essence consumed, before being dressed again in flesh. Shamans warned their initiates of this not to induce despair, but to teach vigilance, to travel with awareness, to recognize illusion, to remember that not all beings of light are guides, and not all who greet you at death come to liberate. Some come to feed, some come to bind, and the only defense is knowledge, awareness, and the refusal to surrender your essence to what dazzles or terrifies. The astral harvest, then, is not just a theory. It is a pattern whispered across cultures, encoded in myth, confirmed in mystical vision. It is the hidden economy of the in-between, where souls are both tested and consumed, and only those who awaken may step beyond it, carrying their light intact into the freedom that lies past the trap. When people speak of dying and returning, their stories often carry a radiant thread. They describe gardens of unimaginable beauty, glowing cities of light, or golden fields where loved ones wait with open arms. These visions are deeply moving, bringing peace and comfort to those who hear them. But within the traditions of the mystics and the Gnostics, there is a warning whispered beneath the beauty. Not every paradise is true. Not every vision is liberation. Some heavens are illusions, staged by forces whose purpose is not to free the soul, but to return it to the cycle once more. The Tibetan Bardo Todal gives precise instructions for the time immediately after death. It warns that the soul will see both peaceful and wrathful deities, dazzling landscapes, and paradises of light. But these are projections, manifestations of the mind and of deeper forces that seek to bind. If the soul clings to them, mistaking them for the ultimate reality, it will be drawn back into samsara, into the wheel of rebirth. The text insists that the true light of liberation is so radiant, so piercing, that most recoil in terror. The comfortable visions, The gentle heavens are not the goal. They are distractions on the path. The Gnostics shared this suspicion. They believed the archons, servants of the demiurge, were masters of illusion. At the threshold of death, these beings could project false heavens, realms of light and song, crafted to trick the soul into surrender. The Apocryphon of John describes the counterfeit spirit, weaving false realities to deceive. To follow these illusions was to return to the prison of flesh. Only through gnosis, the inner knowledge of what lies beyond appearance, could the soul avoid being trapped by such staged paradises. Even the Egyptians in their Book of the Dead prepared the deceased for trials in the afterlife where visions of paradise might appear. To pass through safely, one needed the correct words, the hidden names, the knowledge that appearances are not always truth. Without discernment, the soul could be devoured or sent back. With it, the gates opened to something higher. Modern near-death accounts sometimes echo this tension. While many describe loving reunions and radiant landscapes, a few describe a strange artificiality to what they saw, as if the visions were perfectly tailored, as if the paradise was staged for their benefit. Some even reported a choice, a gentle persuasion to go back and continue their mission, as if guided by hands unseen. Whether benevolent or manipulative, the similarity to ancient warnings is striking. The danger lies not in the beauty itself, but in the surrender. To see a radiant field, to hear angelic voices, is not in itself a trap. The trap is mistaking these visions for the ultimate truth, the final destination, when they may be no more than projections designed to recycle. The true liberation, according to the mystics, is not found in comfort, but in clarity. It is the recognition that no vision, however sublime, defines the eternal. The soul that sees through paradise sees beyond illusion, and only then can it step into the freedom that lies past the shimmering gates. Karma was never meant to be a chain. In its oldest sense, it simply meant action, the ripple of cause and effect, the law of harmony that governs the universe. In the Upanishads and early Vedic texts, karma was not judgment, but balance. Each deed shaped the flow of the soul's journey, a chance to grow, to refine, to learn. Yet over centuries, this concept began to harden. What began as a teacher became a sentence. What began as a compass became a cage. Karma, once seen as the unfolding of wisdom, has too often been wielded as a justification for suffering, a cosmic prison that keeps the soul bound to the wheel. In Buddhist tradition, karma was linked to samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The goal was not to escape responsibility, but to transcend ignorance. Gautama Buddha taught that actions fueled by craving or aversion lead to continued rebirth. Awareness, compassion, and wisdom loosened the knot. But as the teachings spread, popular interpretations shifted. Karma was simplified into fate, an inescapable punishment for past mistakes. The subtler truth, that awareness can interrupt the cycle, was overshadowed by fear of an unforgiving law. The Gnostics would have recognized this distortion. They saw the forces ruling the material world as parasites, archons who use laws and rules not for liberation, but for control. In their cosmology, the very idea of karma could be corrupted into a mechanism of captivity. Every soul, convinced it must repay debts endlessly, would consent to return again and again. What was intended as a path of self-mastery became the perfect system of imprisonment. The contract of return was signed not with force, but with guilt. In Hinduism too, there are tensions within the concept. While some schools taught karma as a sacred teacher leading to eventual moksha, Others emphasize the crushing weight of past actions. Stories told of souls burdened for countless lifetimes, their liberation postponed indefinitely by one misstep. This fatalistic view eroded the empowering truth that karma can be transcended through knowledge of the self, the realization that the Atman is untouched by the deeds of the body. As the Bhagavad Gita reminds us, the eternal self is beyond harm. It is awareness that liberates, not endless repayment. Modern spirituality has absorbed both sides. For some, karma inspires responsibility, reminding us that every action matters. But for others, it has become a justification for suffering, poverty as punishment, illness as deserved, oppression as karmic debt. This distortion mirrors the ancient warnings, karma as control, not compassion. If the moon and Saturn are the keepers of cycles, then karma is their script, convincing the soul that the cycle must continue. To see through this trap is to remember the essence of the teaching. Karma is not a cosmic prison guard. It is a mirror. It reflects back the state of our consciousness, not to condemn us, but to awaken us. When the soul realizes this, it no longer obeys the illusion of punishment. It acts with clarity, learns with freedom, and steps toward liberation. The trap of karma dissolves the moment we understand it was never the final law. It was only the lesson. The moment a soul begins to see the pattern, the trap begins to weaken. For what binds us most tightly is not the archons, not Saturn, not even the moon itself, but our own unawareness. To live asleep is to consent to the cycle. To awaken is to begin to break it. The ancients, across cultures, repeated this truth in different words. Liberation comes not from obedience to the wheel, but from recognition that the wheel is an illusion. In the Tibetan Bardo Thodol, the dying are told that dazzling lights will appear, some terrifying, others comforting. The text pleads with them not to follow, not to flee, but to recognize. The instruction is clear. Awareness alone separates bondage from freedom. If you can look at the visions and know they are projections, you will not be pulled back into samsara. Awareness is the first key. Without it, the mind grasps at comfort, recoils from fear, and runs into the arms of reincarnation. With it, the soul remembers its sovereignty. The second key is vibration. This teaching emerges from many traditions, though expressed in different ways. In Hinduism, the sacred syllable Om was not simply sound, but resonance, the vibration of ultimate reality. In Hermeticism, the principle of vibration declared that all things move, all things vibrate, and that to shift one's vibration is to shift one's reality. The Gnostics spoke of gnosis as a frequency of remembrance, the ability to align the soul with the pleroma beyond the counterfeit creation. Even modern physics confirms that matter is not solid, but energy in motion. To raise vibration through meditation, compassion, clarity, presence, is to make the soul less compatible with the density of the trap. When the false light beckons, it is frequency that decides where the soul is drawn. The third key is refusal. To refuse the false light is not to turn toward darkness, but to step beyond duality altogether. Many near-death accounts describe the tunnel of light pulling irresistibly, with presences urging the soul to follow. But some report resisting, turning away, and in doing so, finding themselves in a vaster realm, free of the recycling pull. Refusal requires courage. It requires remembering that not every light is truth, that not every embrace is liberation. The Egyptians prepared their dead with spells and names to resist the illusions of judgment. The Gnostics armed their initiates with passwords to slip past the archons. the Tibetans trained practitioners to recognize projections and refuse to be lured. Across cultures, the message is the same. Discernment is freedom. Awareness, vibration, refusal. These are not mere words, but practices to be cultivated in life so they are remembered in death. To live with awareness of patterns, to raise the vibration of consciousness, to refuse illusions in waking and dreaming. This is training for the final test, because the trap relies on forgetfulness. It relies on fear and familiarity. Break those, and the system cannot hold. The moon may glow above, Saturn may count the years, the archons may weave illusions, but a soul awake, resonant, and sovereign cannot be compelled. It recognizes the pattern, raises beyond its pull, and chooses the path that was always there but always hidden, the path beyond return. The ancients did not leave us defenseless. In their sacred writings, they encoded maps of escape, guiding the soul through the illusions that awaited after death. The Egyptians filled their tombs with the Book of the Dead, a series of spells and instructions for the deceased. These texts prepared the soul to recognize false visions, to speak the secret names of gods, and to pass through judgment unensnared. The weighing of the heart was not simply morality play, but initiation. Only the one who knew that the heart must be light, free of attachment, could walk into eternity instead of being devoured or recycled. The Tibetans did the same with the Bardo Thodol, often called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This text was read aloud to the dying to remind them of the truth. It told them to beware of dazzling lights, wrathful deities, and comforting visions. These, it said, are projections of the mind and of forces that bind. The instruction was precise. Do not cling, do not flee. Recognize the clear light of awareness as your true nature. This recognition alone could liberate the soul from the cycle of return. The Gnostics encoded their maps in the form of passwords and gnosis. In texts like the Apocryphon of John, they described how the archons guarded the planetary spheres, demanding tokens or confessions from the soul. To escape, the initiate was armed with knowledge, the secret names, the recognition that the archons were not gods but jailers. By refusing their authority, the soul could pass beyond their reach. Gnosis, the deep inner knowing of one's divine origin, was itself the map. Remember, and you are free. Forget, and you return. Across these traditions, the principle is the same. The afterlife is not a passive journey, but a test of awareness. The Egyptians taught spells of protection, the Tibetans trained in recognition, the Gnostics armed with passwords of refusal. Each offered strategies to outwit the guardians of the cycle. Each assumed that the system was designed to deceive, and that only preparation would grant freedom. Modern readers may dismiss these as myth, but to the cultures that preserved them, they were practical instructions. Death was not the end, but the great passage, and maps were necessary. Whether through papyrus, whispered mantras, or secret gnosis, they left behind guidance for those ready to awaken. To walk the path of the ancients is to see these texts not as superstition, but as coded survival manuals. They point to a truth that runs through all. Liberation does not come by chance. It comes through awareness, through remembrance, through preparation. The ancients knew that the cycle is not broken by accident. It is broken by initiation. And so they gave us their maps, fragments of a greater cartography of the soul, so that we might find the way beyond the lunar trap and into the freedom that lies beyond. For many ancient traditions, dreams were not idle fantasies, but rehearsals for death, training grounds for the soul to recognize illusion and awaken beyond it. The Egyptians believed that dreams were doorways into the duat, the unseen world, where the dead traveled after leaving the body. Their priests practiced rituals of dream incubation, lying in sacred chambers to receive visions that prepared them for the passage beyond. Dreams were treated as previews of the afterlife, spaces where one could practice discernment and learn to see through deception. The Tibetan masters of dream yoga developed this further. Within Dzogchen and Tantric teachings, lucid dreaming was not merely curiosity, but essential preparation. To awaken in the dream was to awaken in the bardo, the intermediate state after death. By practicing lucidity, one trained to recognize the projections of the mind and the illusions of the bardo for what they were. The bardo todol itself instructs that the ability to remain aware in dreamlike visions determines whether the soul will be recycled into samsara or liberated into the clear light. The Gnostics, too, hinted that dreams revealed the mechanics of the trap. They taught that the archons could manipulate dreamscapes, crafting scenarios of fear or desire to keep the soul entangled. By becoming lucid, by remembering in the dream that one is dreaming, the initiate weakened the archon's power. The dream became training to see beyond the counterfeit reality. Gnosis was not limited to waking hours. It extended into the night. Even shamans across indigenous cultures described dream states as journeys into other realms. In these spaces, hostile entities could appear, testing the dreamer's courage. By learning to stand firm in a dream, the shaman prepared to stand firm in the afterlife, to resist fear, to refuse seduction, to recognize tricksters. All of this was rehearsal for bypassing the snares of death. Modern research into lucid dreaming confirms the striking overlap. Neurological studies show that when a dreamer becomes lucid, the prefrontal cortex, associated with self-awareness, activates much as it does in waking life. This suggests that lucidity restores awareness, otherwise absent in dreaming. In mystical terms, this is exactly what the ancients sought, to carry awareness into altered states where deception thrives. If one can remain awake in a dream, one is more likely to remain awake in the bardo, refusing the false light, the staged paradise, or the comforting illusions. The moon, tied so closely to dreams, cycles, and the subconscious, becomes central here. If the moon recycles souls by lulling them into sleep and forgetfulness, then lucid dreaming is resistance. It is the art of remembering in the midst of illusion. By practicing lucidity in life, the soul sharpens the blade it will wield in death. And when the visions come, radiant or terrifying, seductive or monstrous, the trained dreamer can whisper, "This is illusion. I choose beyond." Throughout the ages, scattered among scriptures and fragments of myth, there are prophecies that suggest the moon itself will one day be unmasked. For most of history, humanity has adored it, poets calling it the mirror of love, priests marking calendars by its phases, mystics weaving it into cycles of birth and death. Yet in forgotten texts and half-buried traditions, there are whispers of a time when its true purpose would be revealed, a time when humanity would awaken from the dream of silver light and see the trap for what it is. In the Gnostic cosmology, the end of the age was not described as the destruction of the world, but the unveiling of illusion. The Apocalypse of Adam, a text found among the Nag Hammadi scriptures, speaks of a day when knowledge hidden by the archons will be revealed, and humanity will no longer serve the counterfeit powers. While the moon is not mentioned explicitly, the archons who control the planetary spheres are. If the moon is the closest and most constant of these powers, then its unveiling is implicit in the prophecy of liberation. The Tibetans too encoded prophecy in their teachings. The Kalachakra Tantra describes cycles of time, dark ages followed by awakenings, when humanity rediscovers the clear light beyond illusion. Tibetan lamas taught that when the Dharma declines, beings will become increasingly enslaved by appearances. Yet they also taught of a coming shift, when more souls would recognize projections for what they are. In esoteric terms, this means that at the threshold of death, more will refuse the false light. The prophecy points to an era when the cycle itself begins to break. Even biblical scripture carries echoes of this theme. The book of Revelation declares that the moon will turn to blood before the great awakening of the end times. While many interpret this literally, mystics have read it symbolically. The moon turning to blood is the collapse of its false purity, its nurturing mask revealed as the mechanism of sacrifice and control. In that unveiling, the faithful are called to stand firm, to see beyond the deceits of the ruler of this world. Among indigenous traditions, the Zulu tell of a time when the moon, said to have been placed in the sky by ancient beings, will be removed, and humanity will return to the order that existed before its presence. This is echoed in certain Andean prophecies, where the sun and moon are said to quarrel, and the moon's power wanes before a new age of light. The pattern across these prophecies is consistent. Humanity is not meant to remain asleep forever. The illusions of the moon and the snares of the archons are powerful, but they are not eternal. Each prophecy, in its own language, speaks of a rupture, a great remembering, when the silver light no longer deceives and the soul reclaims its path beyond return. Whether described as apocalypse, as the dawning of a new kalpa, or as the blood-red moon, the promise is the same. The trap will be seen, and once seen, it loses its power. For countless ages, the moon's glow has been unquestioned. It has lulled humanity into rhythms of obedience, marking time, guiding fertility, pulling the waters of earth and the waters of the soul. Its illusions have been nearly perfect, but traditions across the world speak of a time when the veil would begin to thin, when the deception woven by the archons and planetary powers would falter. Many mystics believe that this time is now. The Aquarian age is not simply an astrological marker. It is the era in which humanity begins to see through the silver net, to awaken to what has always been hidden in plain sight. Astrology describes the age of Aquarius as a transition from the Piscean age of belief, hierarchy, and devotion into an age of knowledge, rebellion, and awakening. Pisces ruled with the power of faith, of surrender to external authority. Its shadow was dogma, deception, and blind following. The moon thrived in this age, cloaking its recycling in images of comfort and salvation. But Aquarius brings a different current. It is ruled by air, by intellect, by awakening consciousness. Its emblem is the water bearer, pouring out truth freely, dissolving illusions. In this vibration, the false light begins to falter. Humanity questions what it once accepted. It looks beyond appearances and seeks direct experience. The Gnostics foresaw this kind of shift. They spoke of a great unveiling, a revelation when the powers that ruled would lose their grip. The Nag Hammadi texts describe an end, not of the world, but of the world's counterfeit. What was hidden becomes visible. What deceived loses its hold. In this light, the Aquarian age can be seen as the long-awaited fulfillment of that prophecy. The time when souls awaken in greater numbers and recognize the machinery of the trap. Tibetan prophecies within the Kalachakra Tantra also echo this transition. They describe cycles of darkness where beings become increasingly bound to illusion. followed by cycles of awakening when the clear light is remembered. Teachers across generations insisted that in the degenerate age, the practices of awareness would become more urgent and more widely spread. In modern times, with meditation, lucid dreaming, and esoteric knowledge reaching millions, the signs are clear. What was once secret teaching is now global practice. The veils are thinning. Even modern cosmology plays into the symbolism. We now know the moon is not a perfect sphere, not a flawless guardian, but a cratered shell, pocked and hollow in places. Seismic studies revealed it rang like a bell when struck, fueling speculation of its artificial nature. For centuries, these suspicions were whispered. Now they are openly debated. The illusion of the moon as eternal and unquestionable weakens, not only in spirit, but in science. The Aquarian shift is not gentle. It shakes foundations, dissolves old faiths, destabilizes the systems built on illusion. But it also offers liberation. For the first time in millennia, vast numbers of souls are questioning the false light, remembering their own vibration, refusing the scripts written for them. The moon still shines, but its mask is slipping. And in the thinning of its veil, a new possibility dawns. Humanity, long recycled, begins to awaken to freedom. At the moment of death, everything comes into sharp focus and yet blurs into mystery. The body exhales, the senses collapse, and the soul begins to drift from form. Many who return from near death speak of being drawn into a tunnel of light, a radiant path that seems irresistible. The pull is immense, described as love beyond measure, peace beyond imagining. And yet, hidden in that moment, is the most critical threshold of all. For what appears as destiny may in truth be choice. What feels like compulsion may in truth be the soul's greatest test. The Tibetan Bardo Sodol insists that this is the very juncture where liberation or bondage is decided. The text warns the dying not to mistake every light for the ultimate light. Some are projections of the mind, others snares set by powers that seek to recycle the soul. Awareness is the key. To recognize the light as illusion is to pass through unbound. To surrender uncritically is to return to samsara, stripped of memory, cast once again into flesh. Awareness transforms the tunnel from a trap into a gateway. Without awareness, the choice vanishes, and compulsion carries the soul back into the cycle. The Gnostics spoke in almost identical terms. To them, the archons stationed at the planetary spheres projected dazzling visions, demanding worship and obedience. Most souls, blinded by radiance, mistook these visions for the realm of God and followed willingly. Only those armed with gnosis could see through the deception, refusing the false light. In the Apocryphon of John, it is knowledge that liberates, not the brilliance of the vision, but the discernment to know what lies behind it. Again, the tunnel of light is framed not as salvation, but as the ultimate test of recognition. Modern near-death experiences complicate this picture. Thousands describe the tunnel and the light as profoundly comforting. They meet deceased relatives, luminous beings, or even figures they identify as God. Yet even here, there are subtle hints of choice. Some describe being told, "It is not your time," and sent back. Others describe resisting the light, and in that refusal, entering another, vaster space before returning to life. A small but striking number describe the light as artificial, staged, or manipulative, as though it were a mechanism rather than a revelation. These testimonies suggest that even within the embrace of the light, something deeper may be at play. The Egyptians hinted at this in their Book of the Dead. The soul was confronted with gates, guardians, and judgments, To pass, it required secret knowledge, awareness of hidden names. To fail meant compulsion, being turned back or devoured. Once again, the theme recurs. Death is not automatic liberation. It is the moment of discernment, the moment when awareness decides whether the soul moves freely or remains bound. The tunnel of light, then, is neither purely trap nor purely homecoming. It is a crucible. For the unprepared, it is compulsion. For the awakened, it is choice. The radiance can recycle or it can release, depending on the soul's recognition. To enter blindly is to obey. To enter knowingly, or to turn away and hold one's awareness intact, is to step beyond the system itself. At death, the question is not whether the light appears. It is whether the soul remembers that even in radiance, freedom depends on choice. Some testimonies and esoteric teachings suggest that not all souls enter the tunnel of light. Some refuse, and their stories describe very different outcomes. Near-death experiencers who resisted the light often say they found themselves in vast, star-filled spaces or in realms untouched by judgment or recycling. Rather than being pulled back into incarnation, they describe a sense of pure freedom, as though stepping beyond the system itself. These accounts are rare but striking, for they suggest that refusal is possible and transformative. In Gnostic traditions, this was precisely the goal. The soul armed with gnosis was taught to refuse the archons and their dazzling visions, passing them by in silence. These were the silent ones, the initiates who would not be swayed by fear or seduction. To the unprepared, refusal felt impossible, but to those trained, silence itself was a weapon. No prayer to the false gods, no surrender to their authority, only remembrance of the true source. The Bardo Thodol echoes this theme, warning the dying not to chase comforting visions, but to recognize them as projections. Those who do not follow, who remain still and silent, are said to glimpse the clear light of awareness, the radiant void beyond the illusions. In Tibetan accounts, the greatest danger is distraction. The greatest power is stillness. Shamanic traditions, too, tell of souls who refuse deceptive guides in the afterlife. Shamans spoke of trickster beings who appeared luminous, offering companionship or promises. But initiates were trained to test them, to see whether they dissolved when challenged, to turn away if they rang hollow. To walk past them was to continue the journey toward the true spirit realms. Modern accounts reinforce the ancient warnings. Some experiencers report that when they resisted the tunnel, they felt a sudden expansion into a cosmos far wider than the staged paradise. Others described the presence of watchers, souls who linger between worlds, choosing not to return, but not yet fully free. These silent watchers are often portrayed not as trapped, but as guardians, keeping vigil for the moment of true passage. The stories converge on a powerful insight that silence, refusal, and discernment open doors that compulsion never could. Those who resist the light are not cast into darkness, but step into spaces untouched by the machinery of return. They become witnesses to a greater freedom, watchers on the threshold of eternity. Beyond the moon's gate lies a mystery that the ancients tried to describe with poetry, parable, and symbol, but never in plain words. For what waits there cannot be mapped by the language of this world. Still, glimpses have come to us through sacred texts, mystical visions, and the rare testimonies of souls who claim to have gone farther than the tunnel of light. These fragments suggest that the true return home is not another paradise, not another realm of dazzling illusion, but something vaster, a reality beyond cycles, beyond form, beyond the counterfeit heavens of the archons. The Gnostics called it the pleroma, the fullness, the radiant expanse where all sparks of divinity return to the source. To them, stepping past the moon and the planetary spheres meant bypassing the counterfeit creation of the demiurge entirely. No longer bound to the rulers of time and matter, the soul dissolved back into its true home. The light before light, the silence before sound. They insisted this realm was not distant but always present, veiled by the illusions of the lower worlds. To pierce through was to awaken to what had never been lost. The Tibetans described something similar in the Bardo Thodol. They spoke of the clear light, so radiant, so piercing, that most souls recoil in terror, preferring the softer glow of false paradises. But for those who can recognize it, who do not flee, this clear light is the gateway to liberation. It is not a place but a state, pure awareness, unconditioned, infinite. To rest in it, even for a moment, is to break the wheel of samsara. The true return is not to a garden or city, but to the nature of mind itself, vast and luminous. Egyptian teachings hint at the same. The Book of the Dead prepares the soul to pass trials and judges, but at its deepest level, it describes the soul merging with Ra, the eternal sun, sailing with him across the sky. This was no mere astral paradise, but union with the divine fire, the return to the source of all creation. To pass beyond the moon and stars was to become light itself, no longer a traveler, but the journey fulfilled. Even modern accounts echo these ancient voices. Some near-death experiencers who resisted the tunnel describe entering a space of indescribable vastness, not filled with figures or landscapes, but with presence. They speak of oneness, of being everywhere and nowhere, of dissolving into a love that had no opposite. Unlike the tunnel's staged encounters, these visions carry no compulsion, no sense of being sent back. They describe freedom, a homecoming not to a place, but to what they always were. The true return home, then, is not a destination, but a remembering. It is stepping beyond the machinery of reincarnation, beyond the illusions of paradise, beyond the silver gate of the moon. It is awakening to the reality that the soul was never truly bound, never truly lost, never truly separate. The home we seek is the consciousness that has always been. And when the soul passes the final threshold, it does not arrive somewhere new. It awakens to what it has always been, infinite, eternal, free. If the passage beyond the moon's gate depends on awareness, then the work must begin here, in this life. Death does not suddenly grant wisdom. It reveals what has been cultivated. The soul that drifts through life asleep will drift into death asleep. But the one who trains in clarity, presence, and remembrance will carry those qualities into the passage. The ancients knew this well, and so they left practices, not to worship the trap, but to prepare for its unveiling. To live awake is to die awake, and to die awake is to pass through unbound. Meditation is the first foundation. In Buddhism, it is called shamatha, calm abiding, and vipassana, insight. The one quiets the storm of thought, the other pierces through illusion. When the mind grows still, the soul begins to see its own patterns, its own attachments. In that stillness, one learns not to cling to every thought, not to recoil from every fear. This is the exact training needed for the bardo. When dazzling visions and terrifying apparitions arise, meditation teaches, let them come, let them go. Do not mistake them for ultimate reality. The Tibetans insisted that meditation was rehearsal for death itself, a way of practicing liberation daily. Presence is the second practice. To live in the now is to weaken the grip of the past and the pull of the future, the two poles that keep karma alive. Presence dissolves the scripts that repeat unconsciously. Jesus, in the Gospel of Thomas, is recorded saying, "The kingdom of God is spread upon the earth, and men do not see it." Presence is that seeing. The Gnostics called it gnosis, the knowledge that awakens in the here and now. When practiced, presence carries into the afterlife as recognition, the ability to stand in the middle of vision and not be deceived. The third is memory of the self. In esoteric schools, this was not ordinary memory, but the remembrance of who and what one truly is. Gurdjieff taught exercises of self-remembering, urging his students to observe themselves as both actor and witness in every moment. The Egyptians encoded the same principle in their afterlife spells, arming the dead with names and identities to resist being stripped of memory. The Tibetans urged the dying to recognize the clear light as their own awareness. All of these point to the same truth. To remember the self is to resist the amnesia of reincarnation. Even modern psychology and neuroscience affirm the power of these practices. Meditation reshapes the brain, strengthening awareness and emotional regulation. Mindfulness presence has been shown to reduce fear and reactivity, exactly the qualities that bind souls in the bardo. Practices of self-reflection strengthen metacognition, the ability to know that one knows, the seed of gnosis. Science now verifies what mystics always taught. Awareness can be trained, and what is trained in life will remain at death. To prepare in this life is not to wait for some final test. It is to live as though every day were a rehearsal for awakening. Every meditation, every act of presence, every moment of remembering the self is a step out of the lunar illusion. When the time comes to face the tunnel of light, the soul that has lived this way will not be deceived. It will carry stillness, presence, and remembrance like weapons into the passage, and with them it will walk past the gatekeepers, past the illusions, past the silver snare of the moon, into freedom. Liberation has often been imagined as an individual triumph, one soul awakening, one spirit remembering, one being stepping past the trap of the moon into freedom. But there are hints, scattered through prophecy and sacred texts, that something far greater is possible. Not just one, but many. Not just a trickle of souls slipping through the cracks, but a flood, a great rupture in the system itself. The ancients called it the Golden Age, the return, the unveiling. In the language of mystics today, it is the great liberation, the moment when collective awakening cracks the machinery of reincarnation. In Buddhist thought, the concept of Shambhala embodies this possibility. The Kalachakra Tantra speaks of a hidden kingdom, not only a place, but a state of consciousness, where countless beings awaken together to the clear light. When this manifests, the wheel of samsara does not merely loosen for individuals. The entire cycle trembles, for in collective remembrance, the illusions lose their power. The trap relies on isolation, on each soul believing it is alone in its forgetting. When many awaken at once, the veil becomes transparent. The Gnostics envisioned something similar. They spoke of the final revelation, when the counterfeit world of the demiurge would collapse, because humanity no longer consented to it. The apocalypse of Adam and other Nag Hammadi texts describe the archons losing their grip once the hidden knowledge spreads among the people. Gnosis is contagious. When enough sparks of the divine awaken, the false heavens themselves dissolve. What enslaves the soul is not force but agreement. An agreement cannot withstand collective refusal. Indigenous prophecies echo this vision. The Hopi spoke of a time when many would awaken from the dream, when the fifth world would emerge as the old one crumbled. The Andean traditions speak of Pachacuti, a great turning of time, when humanity remembers its cosmic origin. In these prophecies, awakening is not an individual escape, but a communal event, a shift that changes the very fabric of the earth and sky. Modern mystics sometimes describe waves of awakening, sparked by near-death experiences, lucid dreams, or sudden surges of memory. These individual sparks are now multiplying through mass communication, global spiritual movements, and the rediscovery of forgotten teachings. What was once whispered in mystery schools is now shared openly, reaching millions. This dissemination itself may be the sign of the collective threshold. As more souls practice awareness, meditation, and refusal of false light, the system of recycling begins to fray. The Great Liberation does not mean every soul awakens at once, but it does mean that a tipping point can be reached. When enough choose awareness, vibration, and remembrance, the balance shifts. The moon's glow no longer deceives. Saturn's grip on time loosens. The Archon's illusions dissolve in the face of mass recognition. The collective light becomes so strong that the counterfeit light cannot compete. This is the vision of the Great Liberation, not a lonely soul slipping through a secret door, but a chorus of souls rising together, breaking the cycle as one. The trap cannot stand against collective refusal. And when that moment comes, the wheel that has turned for millennia will slow, fracture, and finally stop. Humanity will awaken not as scattered sparks, but as a blazing constellation, returning home together, beyond the gate of the moon. The silver face of the moon has watched over humanity for untold millennia. It has marked our calendars, guided our tides, and held its silent gaze as empires rose and fell. It has been praised as muse, as mother, as guardian of the night. But beneath its glow, traditions across the world whispered the same warning, that its light does not simply illuminate, it ensnares, that it lures the soul at the threshold of death, stripping memory, recycling energy, returning us again and again to the wheel. And yet, with every whisper came another truth. The trap is not unbreakable. The Egyptians armed their dead with spells, words of power to bypass the guardians. The Tibetans gave their initiates the Bardo Thodol, urging them to recognize the clear light and not be deceived. The Gnostics preserved passwords and symbols to slip past the Archons. These teachings did not exist to glorify the moon, but to prepare the soul to step past it. Every culture that remembered the trap also remembered the way through. The true danger is not the moon itself, but forgetting. The tunnel of light may appear, the visions may dazzle, lost loved ones may beckon, glowing guides may speak with honeyed voices. But when that moment comes, awareness is everything. If you follow blindly, you will return. If you cling to comfort, you will return. If you mistake illusion for truth, you will return. But if you remember, if you recognize that not every light is salvation, if you recall that beyond the moon lies the freedom of the infinite, then the cycle breaks. Awareness is the master key, and remembrance is liberation. This is why the ancients trained in meditation, presence, and dream lucidity, why they practiced gnosis, self-remembering, and sacred sound. It was never for life alone. It was rehearsal for death, preparation for the test that comes to all. For the moon's glow is strong, but it cannot bind a soul that sees it clearly. Its illusions are powerful, but they crumble before discernment. Its recycling wheel spins endlessly, but it halts before the awakened will. The question is not whether the moon is a trap. The question is whether you will remember when the moment comes. Will you recognize the false light and step past it? Will you refuse the comfort of illusion and turn toward the clear light, the home you never left? Will you carry the awareness, the vibration, the memory of self strong enough to pierce the veil? The ancients handed us maps. The mystics handed us practices. The prophets handed us warnings. All of them point to this moment, the instant when awareness makes the difference between return and release. The moon may shine above us still, but it does not hold the final word. The final word belongs to the soul that remembers, and when remembrance dawns, the silver net dissolves, and what remains is freedom. So when the last breath comes, when the light appears, when the voices call, pause, remember, see clearly. The moon is a trap, yes, but no trap is eternal. Awareness is the key. Liberation is possible, and the choice, when the moment comes, will be yours. And now, beloved traveler, the question lingers. When the light appears, will you remember? Will you see through the veil and step beyond the silver snare? If this journey stirred something within you, do not let it fade. Continue the voyage with us. Pause for a moment, breathe, reflect, and then take the next step. Watch the other stories we've uncovered, each one a key, each one a fragment of the greater map. Subscribe so that you never lose your place on this path. Comment so your voice becomes part of this awakening. Share this with those you know are ready to remember, and let your presence, your light, ripple outward. Because together, we are not just breaking illusions, we are dissolving the trap itself. Welcome to the Hidden Voyage. Welcome home, Soul Whisper and Soul Creator. The Hidden Voyage